With 14 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 47th session, Tuesday, January 23, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I'd like to welcome some guests in the Senate, the guests of the Senate President, Vice Mayor Brian Lim of the JCI World President, Councilor Red Erpe Mejia of Dagupan City, Mayor Napoleon Ed Kidd of Candelaria, Quezon, and former board member Pete Oco, province of Zambales. We'd like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to all of our guests.
Also, Ms. Sonia Mendoza, Mother Earth Foundation, Mr. Von Hernandez, and Laracas of GAIA Philippines. Mr. President,
Welcome to all of our guests.
Yeah, Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Bills on first reading. 1665, an act amending Section 9 of Presidential Decree Number 651, entitled Requiring the Registration of Births and Deaths in the Philippines, which occurred from January 1, 1974 and thereafter. Senator Laila De Lima.
Referred to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
1666, an act mandating the Commission on Elections to provide for the office spaces of its failed offices, hereby repealing Section 55 of Batas Pambansa Bilang 881, otherwise known as the Omnibus Election Code of the Philippines as amended. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committees on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation and Finance.
Resolutions. Is Resolution number 588, entitled Resolution Directing the Appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the emerging trend of requiring an additional fee for paper billing, which is being imposed by several private service providers and the Energy Regulatory Commission. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship and Public Services.
589, Resolution Directing the Appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the recruitment of children as combatants by armed insurgents and extremist groups, with the end in view of putting an end to the involvement of child soldiers in armed conflict and promote mechanisms that facilitate the rights and safety of the child. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations and Gender Equality and National Defense and Security.
590, Resolution Directing the Appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the latest Commission on Audit report revealing the worsening state of detention facilities in the Philippines. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
591, Resolution Directing the Appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the role of elected barangay officials and the supervision of barangay civilian volunteers and force multipliers in internal security operations, with the end in view of establishing an effective community-based mechanism for maintaining local peace and order that respects and protects human rights. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committee on Local Government.
592, Resolution Directing the Special Committee on Marawi City Rehabilitation to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the rehabilitation efforts, with emphasis on formulating policies to improve the welfare of internally displaced persons and the capabilities of affected local government units. Senator Sani Angara.
To the Senate Special Committee on Marawi City Rehabilitation.
593, Resolution Directing the proper Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the status of the country's rice supply, with the objectives of introducing new policies and reviewing existing measures and programs implemented to ensure rice supply sufficiency. Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy Binay.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, before the sponsorship speeches, Senator Gordon wishes to make a manifestation.
Senator Gordon is recognized for his manifestation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was supposed to deliver a privileged speech today, but in deference to the many other activities that we have that are equally important, I have withdrawn. I just want to say that this is the eve of Mama Sapano once again. Tomorrow is the day where 67 of our compatriots, 44 policemen, and some of our Muslim brothers died in a battle in Mindanao, and I just didn't want it to pass without any notice. I think it is important that since the dead cannot cry out for justice, once in a while we should remember them so that we never forget. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. President, with the permission of the Chamber, Senator Pamphilo Lacson will make an omnibus sponsorship speech on the issue of anti-hazing. Now, similar to what we did before, while these two committee reports will be sponsored and simultaneously, by the time we deliberate and pass them, we will take it up separately. So with that, Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. Senate Bill 1662 under Committee Report 233 and the privileged speech of Senator Subiri and PS Resolution 504 and 510 on the death of hazing victim Atio Castillo under Committee Report 232.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to consider Committee Report 232 and Committee Report 233.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measures, Mr. President?
Secretary, please do so.
An act amending Republic Act number 8049 to strengthen the law on hazing and regulate other forms of initiation rights of fraternities, sororities, and other organizations, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes.
The other one, sir.
The resolutions.
Committee Report number 232. The resolution, yes.
Committee Report number 232, privileged speech of Senator Juan Miguel Subiri on the death of Horacio Atio Castillo III due to hazing, delivered on September 20, 2017.
NPS resolutions number 504 and PS resolution number 510.
510.
Can we read the title of the two resolutions for the record?
Resolution condemning in the strongest sense the death of freshman law student Horacio Tomas Castillo III and directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an investigation in aid of legislation to hold accountable those responsible for this senseless act.
And the next one.
Resolution directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the recent death of Horacio Tomas Castillo III, allegedly due to hazing-related activities.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measures, I move that the chair of the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Senator Pamphilo Lacson, be recognized to sponsor. Thereafter, Senator Gatchalian and Senator Subiri will deliver a co-sponsorship speech. Senator Lacson.
Senator Lacson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. As mentioned by the Majority Leader, this sponsorship speech will consist of two parts. One on Committee Report number 232 and the other on Committee Report 233. Mr. President, sometime in November or sometime in September 2017, Horacio Atio Castillo III, was offered the promise of mutual support and brotherhood by the Aegis Juris Fraternity not only during his tenure as a law student at the University of Santo Tomas Faculty of Civil Law, but also during the bar review and even in his future practice of the legal profession. Apart from the guarantees made known to him, Atio decided to join the fraternity with a specific goal in mind: to discover his real purpose in life. Little did he know that his search for purpose would cost him his own life. According to Justice Jose Catral Mendoza in the case of Dungo versus People of the Philippines, GR number 209464, dated July 1, 2015, the fraternal contract should not be signed in blood, celebrated with pain, marred by injuries, and perpetrated through suffering. This is the essence of Republic Act number 8049, or the Anti-Hazing Law of 1995. In relation to Atio's death, this committee conducted several hearings and looked into the surrounding circumstances of his death with the end goal of identifying the loopholes of our present anti-hazing law. With only one conviction over the years, it is apparent that the law is weak and must be amended. Mr. President, granting that several controversial issues came out during our public hearings, allow me to highlight some of our committee's findings. Number one, hazing is a practice of the Aegis Juris Fraternity. No less than 3 members of the fraternity, namely John Paul Solano, Jason Adolfo Rovinos, and Mark Anthony Ventura, who joined the fraternity on different academic years, testified under oath that they were mentally tortured, slapped, punched, and paddled as conditions precedent to becoming members of the said fraternity. 2, based on the testimonies of Solano and Ventura, both of them acknowledged the fact that Atio was a neophyte of the fraternity and that he underwent initiation rites. Moreover, our committee was able to confirm that Atio's body was at the fraternity library before he was brought to the Chinese General Hospital on September 17, 2017, contrary to initial reports that the body was found in Tondo, Manila. 3, Atio Castillo died due to injuries he sustained during the barbaric and inhumane initiation rites of the Aegis Juris Fraternity led by Grand Prefectus Arvin Balag. Based on the medico-legal findings submitted by the Philippine National Police, Atio's death is due to severe blunt traumatic injuries. To be more specific, the muscle trauma sustained by Atio resulted in an increase in the potassium level and a decrease in calcium in his blood, thereby causing immediate death from cardiac failure. This, in fact, was corroborated by Ventura's statement that it was during the paddling when Atio collapsed and became unresponsive. 4, through the fraternity's Facebook frat page, the residents and alumni members were already in the loop and knew what transpired from the time Atio's body was being brought to the Chinese General Hospital up until the news of information that confirmed his death. Mr. President, while almost all fraternity members active on Facebook already knew of Atio's death in the morning of September 17, Mr. and Mrs. Castillo were just beginning to worry about their son. Later that night, they even wandered around the surrounding streets of UST in search of their beloved Atio. Mr. President, no parent deserves to undergo such agony and misery experienced by Mr. Horacio and Mrs. Carmina Castillo. 5, Mr. President, now we proceed to the infamous fraternity group chats which caused public outrage on television and social media. In the course of our hearings, the conspiracy among the members of the Aegis Juris Fraternity to cover up, conceal, avoid, and evade prosecution was revealed through a presentation of numerous screenshots of what happened to be 2 separate Facebook group messages of some members. On the first thread of messages, we highlight Arvin Balag's explicit instructions to deactivate all Facebook accounts and to observe the code of silence. 6, the second message thread created by fraternity alumnus attorney Marvy Abo contained messages from the residents, non-residents, and alumni members. A perusal of the messages revealed exchanges regarding the condition of their neophyte, the confirmation of Atio's death, their initial plan to inform the family, and their decision to forgo the said plan and to rather go with Solano's alibi that the body was found in Tondo. Mr. President, before proceeding further, allow me to highlight the fact that the screenshots presented and the contents thereof were never denied by the members present in our public hearings. In fact, Jose Miguel Salamat and Attorney Ferdinand Rogelio even authenticated the same, albeit impliedly, when they acknowledged and commented on some of their messages in the group chat. 7, Mr. President, upon confirmation of Atio's death, both messages and actuations of identified members of the fraternity were clearly directed towards a cover-up. These include, among others, Ronald Cheng's search for CCTV cameras that may have captured a footage of members when they loaded Atio's body inside Ralph Trangia's red Mitsubishi Strada. Attorney Alston Kevin Anarna's advice to clean the fraternity library and remove the paddles, and Attorney Edsel Bert Canla's forceful resolve that it was best to deny everything. 8, the resident and alumni group chat contained plans to urgently meet in private at noontime of September 17 at the Novotel Hotel in Cubao, Quezon City, to discuss how the situation should be dealt with. With the CCTV footage submitted by Novotel, the PNP was able to confirm that the meeting actually took place that day, as several members active on the group chat were seen in the footages to have used the hotel elevator between 12:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. 9, per the exchange of messages in the group chat, the Novotel meeting was immediately followed by another meeting in the house of Brian Bangi, also in Cubao, Quezon City. During a press conference of DOJ Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre, he made mention that Mark Ventura revealed to them that alumni members gathered several resident members present during Atio's initiation rites in a high-rise apartment for rent somewhere in Cubao. In the course of our research online, we came across an advertisement posted by Brian Bangi on Facebook, which is being flashed on the projector right now. It appears that Brian Bangi is offering a high-rise apartment for rent located in Cubao, similar to the description given by Ventura to the DOJ. Mr. President, before I close the issue on the group chat, I will not allow this opportunity to pass without calling out and make publicly known the pretentiousness and hypocrisy of the Aegis Juris fraternity. Given their evident intention to conceal the result of their barbaric practice of hazing neophytes, it was utterly impertinent for them to issue a statement to the media expressing their condolences to the Castillo family and that they were willing to extend utmost cooperation in the investigation of the case. Their alumni even published a manifesto decrying the alleged hazing incident and called on those who have personal knowledge to come forward and shed light on the incident. We are disgusted to see that among the signatories were lawyers, Alston Kevin Anarna, Henry Pablo Jr., Gaile Dante Caraan, Jem Di Maculangan, Edwin Uy, and Alfonso Versosa, whose names appeared prominently in the infamous group chat that tried to cover up the fatal hazing of Atio Castillo. The mere appearance of their names on the said manifesto calls for public outrage for such indignation and disrespect towards Atio and his family. Then, with respect to Dean Nilo T. Divina, apart from his discretionary acts that showed bias in favor of the fraternity before and even after Atio's death, The following photos reveal his active participation in fraternity-related activities, negating and belying his oft-repeated claims of temporarily severing ties with the fraternity when he assumed the position of Dean of the UST Faculty of Civil Law. Mr. President, this committee rejects Dean Divina's claim that he had no means of identifying the neophyte who died while being initiated by his own fraternity. Why so? Because he could have easily reached out to his law partner, Attorney Edwin Uy, who at the time already had knowledge of Atio's death. Further, he could have also contacted fraternity advisor Attorney Irvin Pabella in order to reach out and be in contact with the resident members of the fraternity. Hindi naman po yata katanggap-tanggap ng isang personalidad as influential as Dean Divina would allow himself to be clueless, considering that the issue would have disastrous effect not only on his leadership, but also on his reputation. Mr. President, we take exception to Dean Divina's assertion that there was no oversight on his part. He even dared mention that he did what was expected. If this committee is asked whether we agree with him on his statement, we will qualify our answer. If based on his capacity as Dean, the answer is obviously no. As a member of the Aegis Juris Fraternity, Mr. President, our answer is a resounding yes. Mr. President, with respect to the University of Santo Tomas, we find that it failed to exercise due diligence in ensuring the implementation of the anti-hazing law. Based on the testimony of its representative, the university's denial as to the ongoing hazing practices of the fraternity was based solely on a signed document entitled Commitment to Anti-Hazing Law, which the university requires from every fraternity and sorority requesting to be acknowledged. A perusal of the bylaws of the fraternity submitted to the UST Office of Student Affairs shows that a neophyte must undergo initiation rites before becoming a member. Granting that the list of members are updated each year, UST should have inquired as to why they were not notified of any initiation rites, notwithstanding the inclusion of new names of members on their petitions for recognition. Finally, granting not only the late filing of the petition for recognition by the fraternity, but also the lack of the required endorsements, the Office of Student Affairs should have outrightly rejected the fraternity's application for recognition. If that were the case, the fraternity would have had no business in the freshman orientation, much more the permission to recruit students like Atio in the Faculty of Civil Law. As a result of our committee's inquiry in aid of legislation, we came up with the proposed amendments to the Anti-Hazing Law of 1995. The misgivings of the said law in protecting future recruits necessitate these amendments. At this point, Mr. President, allow me to briefly enumerate the highlights of our proposed amendments to the Anti-Hazing Law. 1. We seek to expand the definition of hazing to refer to any physical or psychological suffering, harm, or injury inflicted on a recruit, member, neophyte, or applicant as a form of initiation rite or practice made as a prerequisite for admission or a requirement for continuing membership in a fraternity, sorority, or organization, including but not limited to paddling, whipping, beating, branding, forced calisthenics, exposure to the weather, forced consumption of food, liquor, beverage, drug, and other substances. Also included are any other brutal treatment or forced physical activity which is likely to adversely affect the physical and psychological health of such recruit, member, neophyte, or applicant. 2. In terms of scope, our amendments cover all forms of hazing, whether in school-based fraternities, sororities, or organizations, or in community-based and other non-school fraternities, sororities, or organizations. 3. for a more active and proactive participation of schools in regulating school-based initiation rights, fraternities, sororities, and organizations are required to submit and post a written application not later than 7 days prior to the scheduled date, indicating pertinent details regarding the initiation rights. In addition, we add the obligation by school representatives to monitor, record, and report initiation rights so as to ensure that no hazing shall be conducted. 4, we would also require the appointment and identification of advisor or the advisors and create a presumption of knowledge and consent on the advisor's part to the commission of any unlawful act in violation of the anti-hazing law. 5, lastly, apart from the simplification of the imposable penalties, we find it necessary to also penalize persons who had knowledge of any hazing acts committed but failed to report it to the authorities, or those to be found guilty of hiding, concealing, or hampering, or obstructing lawful investigation by the authorities. Mr. President, hazing needs to stop now. Awareness must be raised as to the fact that there is no unity, no brotherhood, no strength, no honor, no dignity, and no respect in hazing. Hazing is merely violence and abuse. Mr. President, to create an effective deterrent against hazing, active participation from the 3 great branches of government, namely the executive, legislative, and the judiciary, is required. On the part of the executive branch, the Department of Justice has already submitted the Castillo case for resolution. In addition, we recognize the fact that no less than the President of the Philippines had committed the speedy resolution of this case. With respect to the legislative branch, the passage of amendments to the anti-hazing law is deemed forthcoming. As to the judiciary, their role is not limited to adjudicating the case in the event of a finding of probable cause against the accused. In the course of the public hearings, we made it clear that the Supreme Court should be proactive and responsive to the issue, which obviously calls upon it to exercise its authority to discipline the lawyers involved in this case. To be blunt, Mr. President, sa aming paniniwala, nararapat lamang po na madisbar ang mga miyembro ng Aegis Juris Fraternity na sangkot sa tangkang pagtatakip sa krimeng naganap. Sila ay ang mga sumusunod: lawyers Marby Abo, Alston Kevin Anarna, Edsel Bert Canlas, Cecilio Jimeno, Ferdinand Rogelio, Eric Fuentes, Cesar Ocampo Ona, Gaile Dante Caraan, Henry Pablo Jr., Jet Villaroman, Cesar de la Puente, Niño Gel Cervantes, Manuel Angelo Ventura III, Michael Vito, Nilo Divina, Arthur Capili, Irvin Joseph Favella, Edwin Uy, Alan Christopher Agati, and all other members to be determined to have had knowledge of Atio's death and failed to report the same to the authorities. Mr. President, during our public hearings, we have invited Attorney Maria Cristina Layusa, the bar confidant of the Supreme Court. Notwithstanding the public interest invested in ensuring that justice is served for the death of Horacio Tomas Castillo III, there appears to be no initiative on the part of the court to proceed against the lawyers involved in their attempt to cover up the crime committed by their fraternity brothers. She insisted recourse towards a longer route through the integrated bar of the Philippines, even if the Supreme Court has the power to motu proprio commence disbarment proceedings. Mr. President, allow me to call the attention of Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno and all the magistrates of the High Court. We are speaking of the death of a young man who joined the fraternity in the hope of increasing his chances of becoming a member of the Philippine Bar. Mr. President, it is undeniable that these lawyers have lost their moral fabric and became undeserving to be part of this noble and dignified profession. As such, upon adoption of this report, we will furnish the Supreme Court a copy of our report together with all the documents received by your committee. May these documents be used as reference in the disbarment proceedings which we expect the court to institute. Sa ating kataas-taasang hukuman, sana po mapatunayan ninyo sa lahat ng sumubaybay sa kwento ni Atio na mali ang sabi-sabi na walang mangyayari dahil malakas ang kanilang mga koneksyon at makakalimutan rin ang isyong ito. On another note, just to put things in their proper perspective, while this committee complied with the order of the Supreme Court dated December 12, 2017, ordering the release in the interim of Alvin R. Balad, pending the resolution of his petition, we are of the view that such order was unprecedented. Further, the order violated the time-honored principle of separation of powers, considering that the prevailing doctrine initiated in the case of Arnold versus Nazareno, GR number L-3820, July 18, 1950, has not yet been reversed by the Supreme Court. The ruling cited that the very reason for the exercise of the power to punish for contempt is to enable the legislative body to perform its constitutional function without impediment or obstruction. Towards this end, I hereby call on my colleagues to be more prudent in protecting the Senate's independence so as to avoid encroachment of its authority in the performance of legislative functions. Finally, with respect to the University of Santo Tomas, an institution known as, and I quote, the Royal and Pontifical Catholic University of the Philippines, unquote, the maintenance of a morally encouraging educational environment will be endangered should they continuously fail to meet the demands of the issue, notwithstanding established proof as to the actual practice of hazing by a fraternity that has existed in the university for the past 36 years. We have yet to hear any pronouncement or decision perpetually banning the Aegis Juris Fraternity. Mr. President, hanggang sa mga sandaling ito, nakakabingi ang katahimikan at nakakabahala ang kakulangan ng karampatang aksyon ng UST sa trahedyang sinapit ni Atio. As long as the university remains silent in the hope that all this shall pass, members of the fraternity will continue to huddle somewhere and arrogantly blurt out their senseless pretentious chant, lumalakas, lumalawak, lumalaban. Mr. President, Atio Castillo sought to join a brotherhood in search for his purpose in life. There is no more life to speak of. Let his death serve the purpose of ensuring that the misery of hazing and the employment of appalling rituals will no longer be imposed in the name of brotherhood. Finally, Mr. President, before I close, I beg your indulgence, as I find it appropriate to put on record the names of some reported victims of hazing who we mark this day. Let this legislation be a testament that the following persons did not die in vain and were never forgotten. Mel Hunasan, Leonardo Lenny Villa, Raul Kamaligan, Earl Carl Inicia, Norel Borja Jr., Gilio Servando, Christian de la Cruz, Mark Andre Marcos, Chris Mendez, Gonzalo Albert, Ferdinand Tabtab, Arbel Liwag, Frederick Kahiyang, Felipe Narne, Joselito Fernandez, Mark Roland Martin, Alexander Icasiano, Rafael Albano III, Marlon Villanueva, Dennis Africa, Mark Rodriguez, Menardo Clamucha Jr., Nor Silongan, Ariel Inofre, Anthony Javier, Elvis Sinaula, and Horacio Tomas Castillo III. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
To co-sponsor, Mr. President, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian.
Senator Gatchalian is recognized.
Mr. President, esteemed peers in the Senate, good afternoon to you all. 4 years ago, when I was then still a member of the House of Representatives, the tragic murder of Julio Servando at the hands of his fraternity brothers-to-be shocked the nation and inspired the lower chamber of Congress to take decisive action against the despicable evil of hazing. The bill I filed to answer this call to action, House Bill number 5760, eventually passed the House in June 2015. Unfortunately, the Senate was not able to act on the measure, and the proposed reforms to the anti-hazing law were left on the table when the 16th Congress came to a close 2 years later. I am overcome with a sad sense of deja vu as I stand here today to sponsor Senate Bill number 1662, the Anti-Hazing Act of 2018, because history has repeated itself once more. Yet another innocent and promising young man, Atio Castillo, has lost his life during brutal hazing rites conducted by his fraternity brothers-to-be, and the people demand action from their representatives in Congress. With the passage of the lower chamber's proposed amendments to the anti-hazing law earlier this week, the ball is once again in the Senate's court. I applaud our distinguished colleague and Chairman, Senator Ping Lacson, for acknowledging the urgency of this measure and taking swift action to get this substitute bill on the floor. The horrifying acts surrounding the death of Atio Castillo and the subsequent cover-up by members of the Aegis Juris Fraternity make it clear that there are glaring loopholes in Republic Act number 8049, the anti-hazing law of 1995, which need to be closed. These issues well covered by this bill, which includes provisions that establish clear-cut responsibilities and liabilities of educational institutions in preventing and policing hazing, and severely punish resident and alumni members of fraternities who would dare attempt to frustrate the ends of justice by covering up the hazing crimes committed by their brothers. Most importantly, this bill changes the central paradigm of the law. Instead of regulating hazing, it will completely prohibit all forms of hazing once and for all. Mr. President, this bill is written in the blood of Atio, Julio, and all of the other promising young Filipinos who have lost their lives to the senseless crime of hazing. I urge the esteemed members of this chamber to rally behind the swift passage of Senate Bill number 1662 so that no more blood will be shed in pursuit of brotherhood. We must not allow history to repeat itself once more. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Subiri is present to co-sponsor the measure.
Senator Subiri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the Majority Floor Leader. Mr. President, I thank the good chairman of the Committees on Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, Justice and Human Rights, and Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes, Senator Panfilo Ping Lacson, Senator Richard Gordon, and Senator Kiko Pangilinan, respectively, for their swift and decisive action on the filing of Committee Report number 232 on the investigation on the death of Atio Castillo and Committee Report number 233 on the amendments to the anti-hazing law. Committee Report number 232 discusses the chronology of events that led to the death of Atio Castillo. Many names were mentioned. Some are in the legal profession and in the academe. Names, big and small, which the report recommends to be brought before the bar of justice for them to account for their crimes and misdeeds. Committee Report number 233 introduces amendments to the Public Act 8049 or the Anti-Hazing Act of 1995. Perhaps, Mr. President, we can say that after all the bad things that have happened, the loss and heartache of the Castillo family, who are, by the way, with us here today, there is actually something good that can come out of this tragedy. I laud the committees, most especially Chairman Senator Ping Lacson, for coming up with a comprehensive report which considers, among others, the bill that I filed, Senate Bill number 1591, or an act prohibiting hazing and regulating other forms of initiation rights of fraternities, sororities, and other organizations. I thank the chairman for including a clearer definition of the act of hazing, and most importantly, for adding a provision that penalizes former officers, non-resident members, or alumni of the fraternity, sorority, or organizations who performs any act to hide, conceal, or otherwise hamper or obstruct any and all investigations that will be conducted after the commission of the crime. Under the report, this will be meted the punishment of reclusion temporal and a fine of 1 million pesos. Moreover, should the former officer, non-resident member, or alumni be a member of the Philippine Bar, he or she shall immediately be subjected to disciplinary proceedings by the Supreme Court or by the concerned professional board if he or she belongs to any other profession subject to the regulation by the Professional Regulatory Commission. Since I delivered the privileged speech on September 20, Mr. President, the committees conducted marathon hearings and invited many witnesses and resource persons to shed light on the death of Atio Castillo. However, to our dismay, the resident and alumni members of Aegis Juris Fraternity, instead of shedding light and speaking the truth in the course of our investigation, not only muddled the investigation by telling lies to these committees, but also attempted to cover up the gruesome crime of their fraternity brothers. Indeed, as in many similar investigations and deaths due to hazing, blind loyalty prevailed upon fraternity members instead of having a clear conscience and sense of justice. But as in the biblical passage in Matthew 3, chapter 3, verse 3, and I quote, "A voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make a straight path for him." Thus, a singular voice in the wilderness, Mr. President, has spoken. Someone perhaps bothered by his conscience had decided to make way for a straight path. We are consoled that Mark Anthony Ventura had decided to come out and tell what he knew of the death of Atio Castillo. By this time, Mark Ventura probably has been ostracized, if not expelled, by his fraternity members, but we want to assure him that we are with him in this fight. Mr. President, as in the previous cases of deaths due to hazing, where offenders are college or law students, the usual plea before the courts of defense lawyers is to show compassion to the youthful offenders and look beyond their crimes. But Mr. President, what about the lives of those that they've extinguished? Enough of this double standard and hypocrisy, Mr. President. What about the future of the youth that they have just killed? All wasted and gone forever. They were already adults, and some of them were even students of law when they committed the crime. And therefore, they must have known the consequences of their actions. To them and their brother's keepers, I say, let the axe fall where they may, and let justice be served for Atio Castillo. Let the death of Atio Castillo not be a senseless death, Mr. President. Let Atio be the last victim of hazing. Through this bill and recommendations, we can bequeath a meaningful life to the Filipino youth in memory of Atio Castillo's death. I would like to even propose that we coin the name of this future Republic Act as the Atio Castillo Law. Mr. President, he once sat on the table, on your table, the table of the Senate President in this August chamber, and told his parents that one day he would make a difference for our country. Indeed, due to his tragic death, he is making that difference. May God bless his soul. May God bless his family. And thus I urge our colleagues, Mr. President, for the immediate adoption of these committee reports. Again, I truly want to thank Senator Lacson and his staff and the members of the committee for these well-crafted committee reports. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Senator Villanueva.
Senator Villanueva is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the onset, may I just put on record that this representation would like to commend and congratulate the chair, Senator Lacson, for that committee report. And at this juncture, I would also like to manifest my expressed desire to be made co-author of this measure that we are going to deliberate. And I express my full support for the proposed measure, and as a member of the Tomasian community, I also would like to continue to put on record that I maintain my disgust at the death of Atio Castillo at the hands of the Aegis Juris Fraternity. And Mr. President, I maintain na hindi po talaga nasusukat sa karahasan ang tunay na kapatiran. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we suspend the consideration of the measure, Mr. President, just for the record, this representation would like to thank the sponsor and the other sponsors, Senator Lacson and the rest, because I filed this bill in the 15th Congress, refiled it in the 16th Congress, refiled it in the 17th Congress, and finally it will see the light of day with this committee. So thank you very much. I move to suspend the consideration of Senate Bill, the anti-hazing measures under Committee Report 232 and 233. Give time to the other senators to study the
Any objection? Hearing none, we suspend the consideration thereof.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of House Bill 4.